First of all, I want to express my gratitude both for this extraordinary museum and for this extraordinary exhibition and for this extraordinary woman, Alice Walton, whose birthday we're also celebrating today. Thank you so much. It has really surpassed, I think, everybody's expectations, what you have achieved here. When we first met over 3 years ago, when I interviewed you at an event at Sotheby's, you invited me to visit Crystal Bridges, and that started an amazing journey for me, which became very personal because my daughter, who is here with me, Isabella Huffington, ended up doing her thesis at Yale, which she just graduated from last year, on the Crystal Bridges Museum. So she had a lot of opportunities to come here and write about this amazing museum, accessibility, what it means to have over 1 million people already having visited this place, and as we saw in the sign as we walked in, feel that they belong here, which was Alice's dream. And then just over 2.5 years ago, I feel as though I was born at the creation because we're in Aspen, when Alice and Dawn and the wonderful Sandy Edwards told me about this dream of creating this exhibition. So you know how you feel somehow that you are seeing a baby being born? When you hear about something and now you actually are seeing something that has come to life. And it's a truly extraordinary undertaking. The Huffington Post did a story yesterday calling it the biggest show of the year. And we want to continue covering the stories of these amazing artists, the work they're doing, as well as all the other artists, Dawn and I are talking about that, who didn't make it to the exhibition, but who are also part of your journey. And there was a lot in the conversation so far about the role of technology in art, and I think we can all agree and have been convinced by the panelists so far that there is an important role in technology, but also, as Matthew Moore put it this morning, there's been a bit of a shallowing of experience, and I think what you are doing here is deepening the experience, deepening the connections to communities around America, deepening the connection with ourselves, going back really to delivering on the original promise of a museum, which was producing a sense of wonder, elation, lifting a weight, what we Greeks called catharsis. And I've definitely been feeling that since last night. I don't want to leave, but I'm delighted to be joined by these wonderful panelists. I'm not actually going to introduce Don because he's our host, but I just want to give you a couple of fun facts about him. Did you know that he has a collection of 450 Murano glass pieces? And did you know that he swims for 40 minutes every day? No wonder he looks like that. And he also has a 9-year-old son and lives here completely integrated in Bentonville with his partner, Don. So thank you so much again from all of us for what you've created here. And John is really an embodiment of something very new. Not only is he an artist in the conventional sense, represented by the Marlborough Gallery, producing great work. I hope you've seen his meta gallery, his sculpture here in the exhibition. But he's also a human platform. You know how we talk about platforms, which are really technological innovations that facilitate other people's work, other people's expression? Well, John is doing that with other artists. He has his own gallery, which is called in Milwaukee, that he has called the Green Gallery, because he didn't want even to put his name on it, because this is all about other artists. He curates exhibitions, he curates experiences. He actually, at the moment, has different meta galleries that he has curated in Tokyo, in Glasgow, in Los Angeles, in Dallas, and in Milwaukee. And this is really pretty extraordinary, to be as generous as he is. In a previous life, I wrote a biography of Picasso. So the idea of genius and generosity don't normally go well together. So it is extraordinary to meet somebody who has this incredible sense of wanting to facilitate the expression of other artists as well as his own. And in the green room, I discovered that John has actually applied for one of the amazing grants that Ruby Lerner provides as President, Executive Director of the Creative Capital, which is an innovative arts foundation that adapts venture capital concepts to support individual artists. And they've already committed $30 million to 419 projects representing 529 artists. And I tried in my kind of Greek way to expedite the process and get Ruby to agree to grant John what he wants, this project, but she told me no, it had to go through the standard process. But anyway, I did try. But it's looking good, if I may say so. So, Ruby, in the green room, you were saying how there is a distinction between supporting the arts and supporting artists, and that supporting artists requires a different kind of ecosystem and infrastructure, and that's what really you are focusing on. So would you talk more about that?
Yes, I think I was very influenced many years ago when I read something that James Baldwin said. He said, everybody wants an artist on the wall or on the library shelf, but nobody wants one in the house. And I think that one of the things we've been trying to do at Creative Capital is figure out what does it mean to put artists in the house. So, you know, I've also traveled around. I feel very much at home here because I've spent many years on the road, and some of you know I mostly travel by train. So I really have done a lot of traveling myself over the last 16 years. And I've experienced exactly what you're experiencing here, this same kind of vitality and energy in communities large and small all across the country. But what has to happen, and I think it was so great to start this morning with Matt Moore, who's a farmer, when you think about what it takes to have a farm, and what it takes to grow crops. We have to think about artists in that way. You can't just let them be in the community. You have to provide nurturing. You have to provide a system of support. And I think where we've fallen down is that we have communities that have, well, let's do the live workspace downtown, and that will address the problem. Or let's give 3 artists $3,000 this year. Those things by themselves are fine, but what Creative Capital has really taught us is about building an ecosystem of support that is multifaceted and that will be there over a long period of time. And that's what allows a community to grow and sustain itself and enter the national and even global dialogue over time.
And John, what do you feel has been the most supportive thing of all the things you've done for other artists? What has had the most results?
Well, this idea of sustainability I can really identify with. Creating the gallery, I think, has been like a way for me to be able to support artists in my community that I can't like basically buy their work, but I could, through my labors and through introducing them to people and setting up expectations, not only for artists in my community, but also for art patrons in my community. I think that kind of engineering these different platforms for artists to engage and to kind of participate in the community through the Green Gallery, through the art fairs, the Milwaukee International and the Dark Fair, and now a little bit through including other artists' work in my own work. I mean, this idea, the John Riepenoff experience, which I'm honored to have in the show here, that's basically, it's a physical vehicle to actually move artists around from different communities, not only like exporting art from Milwaukee to other parts of the world, but actually connecting these kind of, I guess, peripheral art communities like Glasgow and Milwaukee, or Dallas and Bentonville. Like to be able to connect these different things, actually seeing the conversation, and it's not a didactic thing that I'm doing. I'm actually just putting people together and stimulating the conversation in that way.
And you may want to explain that in this gallery, you actually have miniature works of the artists. Would you explain that?
Sure, yeah. My piece in the gallery here is just a box on the wall with a hole in the bottom, and you can climb up a ladder, stick your head inside. And within that, I actually program other people's work. So a lot of times, I kind of evade subject matter in lieu of someone else's work. So in the show here, I'll be rotating 4 different exhibitions of other artists' work, and I followed kind of the same map that these guys followed, and representing different parts of the country.
Love it.
So, Don, you demonstrated that life still matters, that despite the technology and what is made possible, you actually took the 100,000-mile journey. You know, you could have asked them to send you their work, but you wanted to go visit them. You wanted to see them in their goat farm or their defunct pie farm, all these amazing places where you visited the arts. And I particularly love the story of the 10-year-old aspiring artist. You had gone to visit his mother, but he knew you were there to see the art. So just before he left for school, he made sure that his art was prominently displayed in the house and that you would take a look at it. So you made an effort to actually go live. And what surprised you about that?
Well, I just want to follow on Ruby's quotation of James Baldwin that I think we should all definitively have artists in the House, and maybe in the Senate too. So I think that's a very good place to begin. I thought, Ariana, that it was critical for us to see the artists in the place of their creative energies, where they make their work. And it wasn't only about the studio, although the studio and even the post-studio practice, because obviously today many artists work beyond a traditional studio. They don't work in a boxed room with windows, they work in a community. But to see the studio practice and also to see the communities and those ecosystems in which artists live and operate, it was so inspiring and educational for us in terms of the creation of the show and the educational underpinning of this exhibition, to see the ways in which artists connect with their communities, with the imperatives, the ideas, the issues of those communities, and the advocacy roles that they often play in addressing issues. We heard very eloquently from Maya Lin, but all the artists that we visited are engaged in some form of advocacy in their communities, in their localities, in issues that are global, local, national, of whatever stripe. And it was incredibly inspiring to find these artists, the connections that they've made, the communities that they've built around their work, around their ideas, in large places, in large cities, in small towns, in rural areas. Some of these are physical communities, some of them are virtual communities, communities of conversation that they're engaged in. And these ecosystems that Ruby alludes to were fascinating because they tend to, and this is a way in which all of us can support art and artists and art making, they surround a variety of different kinds of situations. So these ecosystems grow up around universities and colleges, other kinds of schools. They grow up around artists, artist impresarios, artist curators such as John, artists who kind of pivot their role as artists into a kind of curatorial practice. They grow up around community centers and community arts centers. There are all across the country sort of alternative spaces, spaces that are not commercial galleries and are not museums, but are some hybrid, often designed and built by artists, sometimes not. And they just grow up around every kind of enterprise that you can imagine, all of which we have some role in connecting with as communities. And so this support system can come in many different ways. It can evolve in very unique ways, depending on place, depending on the size of community, depending on the history of that community. Bentonville is a very young place, but clearly there is a great deal of cultural infrastructure and ecosystem being built here. So it was incredibly inspiring and powerful to experience that in such a range of places. I think we visited 123 different places, cities, and 960 some artists, and every one of them unique in terms of that expression of community, ecosystem, artist working in collaboration.
Well, what you brought together has clearly shattered the myth that was exemplified by that New Yorker cover. You remember that Saul Steinberg did, that said the view of the world from 9th Avenue, and New York was dead center. And that myth is clearly shattered here today. But there's another thing that's being shattered, and both Ruby and John have been interested in that, and this is, what is success for an artist? Because in our world now, I know that since my daughter is a painter, and I know whenever people ask her, what do you do? And she says she's a painter, you can hear the sort of unheard question, which is, yes, but what do you really do? And so creating kind of different success metrics is something that you are both interested in. I found something that you said in 2010, Ruby, about how we don't tell people how to define success for themselves. But people are coming out of these arts programs unable to do that and conflicted about what it might mean to be successful.
We see this a lot. We think that you know, you have to get kind of clear with yourself. We talk about our grant as being an opportunity for a conversation with yourself. And there aren't many of those around. And so it allows people to really say what they want out of the project that we're going to be working on them with. And this is something we established right at the beginning of the relationship. And we don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to have success in the most conventional of ways, but we have people who really see success in multiple ways. And so then our job becomes, how do we help this person do the plays in the church basements all over America, and at the same time have the feature article in the New York Times, and at the same time have their plays on off-Broadway or in regional theaters around the country. I don't think it's an either-or world. I think we're in an everything-and world now, and that is just incredibly exciting. And we see this a lot we work with a lot of social practice artists. You heard Tom use that phrase this morning, and these are people whose work is deeply rooted in communities. You have them in the show. This is one of the most exciting, I think, developments in the arts field, because these are people who are taking their arts training and really putting it to use in communities and rethinking what our communities might be and might look like. But guess what? Many of them are making photographs that they would love to have seen in a gallery context, and they would love for you to have them on your walls. So we just don't see that there are these dichotomies. We really see that people are working across all of these areas now, and that's incredibly exciting.
And John, you've been thinking about that yourself.
Yeah, I have to say first, Ariana, I love the idea of, your daughter, like, oh yeah, what are you really? You're not a painter. There's a poet in Milwaukee, Matt Cook, who has a poem about, you say you're a plumber, and everyone's like, oh yeah, you're a plumber, I get it. And if you say you're a poet or an artist, they think you're pretending to be a poet or an artist, And this idea, so Don and Chad, like combing through kind of the middle of America, like part of actually that relationship that happens is just showing up in someone's studio. They take themselves more seriously as an artist, and you're helping actually define that identity, whether or not you invite them to come here to be in a show or not. Like all that stuff kind of builds up. And for me, living in Milwaukee, I think there weren't a lot of expectations of being an artist, and a lot of the artists kind of were on this kind of a not very public part of the culture, or the city there. So as a student, I was going around and I was going to all these institutions. I didn't see any of the work that I really, that I knew was being made, because in studios in other parts of the city. And so, but they weren't being shown in the institutions or even the commercial galleries in the city. So I just basically opened a door in my apartment and made the Green Gallery and started inviting people in, and just providing that public space for these things that are already happening. It actually becomes an aggregate, and it really starts to accelerate the development. But I agree. I'm also interested in sustainability. And early on, I would go to New York, and the New York art handlers, they have a cigarette in one hand and a cell phone text messaging in the other. And some early shows that I helped friends put on in New York, I'd be hauling a piano out of the truck. And the art dealers immediately like, hey, move to New York. Gavin Brown, the first time I met him, he was like, move to New York. And seriously, I was like, the quality of life is too good in Milwaukee to move here and work some like art handling job for a gallery here. And jokingly, I said, if you fly me here, I'll come any weekend. And he did end up flying me there. So I connected with artists and people in New York. But I refused to move there, and actually I didn't totally understand the reason why. I just had a good life in Milwaukee, and I didn't want to chase some image of what something could be in New York. But staying in Milwaukee, I was able to connect people in my region, and it was a really slow build. And I think this desire to be like, oh, I've got this opportunity, I'm going to book it. It's really attractive for artists all around the country. But I think increasingly, artists are they're realizing that they can have relationships with bigger art economies, and they can actually a New York dollar goes a lot further in Milwaukee than it does in New York, and they're realizing they can actually invest in their community. And I think that's actually why I really related to what's going on here in Bentonville. Is like the center. There are many centers, and I think Hollywood and HBO are kind of giving us this story that it's more like these stories that are more plural, and they're more complicated than just these kind of like these linear narratives that we kind of inherited from our parents' generation. And I think it's a little bit more natural for young artists to stay where they are and to find value in the uniqueness of, how diverse every little region of America is.
One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, the sharing economy that we talk about, and this idea that access trumps ownership. And I think that's really true in the art world as well. You need access to certain places and kinds of institutions, but you don't have to own it in the sense that you don't have to live there 24/7. In our early years at Creative Capital, people would say, "I'm so excited, I got this grant, now I can move to New York." We're like, "No, you got this grant, now you can stay home, because we're going to bring the resources to you and you to the resources." And it's a different mindset, I think, than what an artist in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s would have done. And I think this is one of the reasons you're seeing this vitality in place. But we got to talk about the pieces of the infrastructure, I'm obsessed with this, that will keep artists in these communities, the most exciting artists and the most ambitious artists at home. And so we have to look beyond just the obvious things and talk about, is there informed criticism in the community? Is there an educated audience? Is there a patron group in the community? Professional development. This is something that we were doing with our own artists from the beginning, helping people think about building career skills that would be with them throughout their lives as artists. We ask a lot, what will be residual to someone long after we're out of the picture? And I woke up one day and thought, well, why is this going to be limited to this small group of people we can give grants to? So now we have reached 8,000 artists in nearly 400 communities all across the country. And this is an area where technology is having a big impact on us, because we're doing webinars now that people can participate in no matter where they live, and that has been transformative for us. So I think that there are a lot of ways to think about sustaining communities, but they involve an investment, and they involve systems thinking and design thinking. We were talking just briefly last night about the idea of design, and what if we thought about our, not just our art system and how it's designed, or not well designed, I feel. What about our food system? We were talking about that just last night. You were talking about the challenges there. We have to really look at all of these things in a much more comprehensive and fulsome way in order to move all aspects of our society forward.
And don't you see Crystal Bridges as providing kind of institutional validation for this amazing flourishing of the arts everywhere, and the fact that you exist here in the middle of the country and that over 1 million people have come to visit sends a very powerful message beyond what is happening here.
I think so. In fact, I think that was one of the inspirations for the exhibition, that we could have a unique vantage point on places like Bentonville or Wichita or Milwaukee or any number of other places that are not on that Steinbergian map of the country or of the art world, for that matter. And it has been borne out, because people are recognizing that there is great art here, not only in the collection, but great art to be seen from all over the country in this exhibition. And it's been thrilling to be able to share that and to see the way in which people are engaging, both with the exhibition, the works in the exhibition, but with the entire notion that indeed there is art in your backyard. There might be a great artist in your backyard, and we all ought to pay more attention to that. I wanted to follow up on this question of access versus ownership. It's a really interesting concept that played out in our experience of these studios, because in addition to going to fascinating places like Pittsburgh or Milwaukee or Wichita, where we found thriving artistic cultures, communities, great artists at work, planted there, living there, applying their careers there, we also went to some of the big cities. We went to Los Angeles and New York and San Francisco and Chicago, but what we found in those places was it wasn't in the heart of the cities where the most interesting work was being made. It was out further and further in the suburbs and exurbs, and part of that is economic, of course, where is studio space available, not in the heart of San Francisco, but in Hayward and in the Southeast Bay, and similarly in New York. But it was really interesting, that notion of access nowadays can be geographic. It can be because you live 50 miles from a major city, or it can be virtual or by travel. And so, you know, all of these places have access in different ways and provide that kind of necessary access for artists and for their ideas. But it wasn't about ownership. It isn't about being in the heart. It isn't about being in Soho or Bushwick anymore. It's about being wherever you are and finding a connection.
The more places you put the art and the artist's expressions of what is behind it, the more people may be touched and inspired, the way you've inspired us here. So once again, thank you, Don. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.